Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series of fantastic speak webinars. We are really, really fortunate this evening to have Donna Fraser speaking to us about her career and her longevity and how she actually managed to do all of that. It's so impressive. I can't wait for you guys to really see what she's been able to achieve throughout her career. Before we get going, I'd just like to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you can't hear me or you can't see the chat box or the vision is a bit like interference is happening, then please refresh your browser window or re-log in. If you've got things like mobile phones and things nearby that are also using Wi-Fi, you might want to disconnect those for the webinar, and that will clear the bandwidth so you can hear us, because we've got some really good talking to do this evening. So I'd like to introduce Donna Fraser. So Donna.
Hi.
Hey. Welcome, 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 welcome. Thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening to get all this information. I'm going to get all that information out of you because your career, prolific, it's just, I've used the word prolific, epitome, just everything that as an athlete, we all should strive for. There's so many adjectives I could use to describe you. I told you I was going to fan out. I'm really your number one fan this evening.
I'll pay you later.
No, so I'm really, really, really pleased to join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. So what I would like to do, first of all, is explain to everybody what Donna has done, because trust me, it was quite an undertaking. So Donna, championship performance. Now, doing what it takes is just another way of describing you. And I told you I was going to fan out. So yeah, going through these, for everybody who doesn't necessarily understand in its entirety the list of accomplishments that you have gleaned over your athletics career. 6-time English school 200-meter champion, European junior champion in the 400, world junior champion, silver medalist, 4 European championships, 5 world championships, and a 4-time Olympian. Very few people can have that level of depth and breadth of their career. Major championships, 1 gold, 3 silver, 6 bronze. What are you going to say to yourself?
Yeah, it's quite weird seeing it all written down, because you forget when you're an athlete, you're just focused on the ultimate goal, and that's to get to the Olympics and get a medal. So you forget what you've done. So when I see it in black and white, it's almost like, oh my gosh, I did that much. But obviously really grateful, and the support that I had to get me to that point can't be forgotten, obviously. One of the individuals was my coach, who was behind me all the way, especially the latter part of my career. But you know, your support network, and obviously I was at school when I was doing the English schools. The support I had was just immense, so I couldn't have done it on my own.
Okay, so I wanted to really lay out what we're talking about, because I know we have a lot of coaches on this call who do from juniors right through to very experienced coaches, and your career has lasted since 1986 in terms of championship performance. I'm sure you were competing before that, but English schools, the people who were coming second must have been really upset to see you every year. They're like, oh, Donna's here.
It's bizarre. English schools, when you're at that age, it's almost that's your Olympic Games. And again, you know, 6 titles, I was just focused on the bigger picture, and that was just winning. It wasn't so much the titles, it was just winning every time I stepped foot on the track. But English schools was a big deal for me, and you're competing against the best at your age group, and it was just an amazing experience to see that sea of colour. And as I say, it just felt like an Olympic Games, not that I'd been to one, but the whole setup, going through the call room at that age, and being with your teammates and the whole team effort, what it meant to represent your county was just, it was quite emotional sometimes, but, you felt accountable for doing well for your county. So it was a huge stepping stone for me.
Absolutely spot on. I remember doing it. I didn't win anything, but I did it for 6 years in a row. And it was your first rounding in the championship performance. You had rounds and you had to qualify and steps to get there. So, yeah. And then seniors, Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, World Champs, just winning trials, just more Commonwealth Games, more European Champs, back to back. And to be able to do that is a real accomplishment, because athletes will know to be able to sustain that level of performance year upon year, and you had your fair share of injuries to deal with as well, and to still have this roster of performances, some doing.
Yeah, I mean, I started off as a 100-meter runner, then my legs grew and they got longer and longer, and I couldn't cope so much getting out the blocks, hence why I stepped up to the 200. But I loved the 200, it was just right for me. And then I was catapulted almost into doing 400 meters, which I wasn't a fan of doing because it just seemed too far. But realistically, it was my event. I was able to unwind. I had the speed endurance behind me, and I guess the rest is history, that I found my niche event, but still stepped back into doing the 200 and the odd 100 meters just to keep that speed going, which contributed to my performances in the 400. And not only physically, but mentally as well. Doing 400 meters weekend and weekend out is not easy. And every 400 meters is not the same, even though you have your race plan. It's never the same. Things can go wrong. The elements, the wind gates on the back straight, the home straight. Not that that doesn't happen in the 100, but, it's all about your pace judgment in the 400. So being able to step back into doing 200s and the 100 just allowed me just to reflect on what I needed to do for the 400.
All right. Well, I put my hands up. I can testify to running next to you, and you're the only athlete that made me feel like I had tiny strides. Everybody else, I had like massive strides. Next to me, it felt like I was just doing this. So your stride length, when you said your legs grew, I was chuckling to myself, because I could fully appreciate and what it's like to run next to you. And then it continues. 99 World Champs, another Olympic Games, another World Champs, another Olympic Games. This is a serious catalogue of championship performances, and obviously we'll speak about AO and the unit is what I call the partnership working. You guys worked as a coach and a coach athlete team. How do you get yourself ready year on year for this sort of performance level?
It's interesting. When I knew I was doing this evening, I went to look through my training diaries, which go way back to 1991, which is pretty scary. And even my writing, I was appalled by it. But anyway, that's by the by. But every beginning of winter training, I'd have a conversation with my coach, and this is even before AO, to decide what the plans were, what we wanted to achieve by the end of that summer season. So we almost had that conversation that we both understood. We knew where we were going. He knew my aspirations, or my coach at the time, what my aspirations were, and likewise what his expectations were of me. So that clear understanding was laid out before we even started our winter training, and that is what was key, I think, for me. If I was the individual that said, well, I just want to just make the final of the trials, then that is what my coach would have worked towards. But I set my standards quite high, sometimes a bit unrealistic, but I'm a true believer that you have to aim high to really succeed, and just make sure that you take those steps to achieve it. But in terms of longevity, part and parcel is the coach and that understanding, but also looking after your body and being that body aware of your limits, both from the coach and the athlete. And again, that comes back to the relationship that you have with your coach. You know, my coach, he knew when I was tired and would adapt the training session to adapt to that. And when I mean tired, I don't mean, oh, well, I'd been partying the night before or anything. It's literally, I'd had a hard week in training. Okay, let's taper down, scale it back a little bit. So I was doing something, but something that my body wouldn't break down, causing injury and having a huge impact long term. So that whole conversation is just so key to performance.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, and I have another slide. So, another world, another Olympic. And I'm going to go back a step because I missed this. Where is it? 2005. That year was a crazy year. I remember 200 and 400 at trials, doubling up. I used to double up 1 and 2. Doubling up 2 and 4 is a feat of engineering. I don't know quite how you did that, and you won both. That is just amazing. You have to appreciate. I know you're laughing at me, but you have to appreciate how impressive that is.
Well, it sounds crazy now. I'm looking at it. I must have been nuts, but it really is down to the programming. And at the time when initially I'd entered both, the program allowed me to do both events, and I thought, well, okay, fine, it's good, a bit of speed work, as my coach would always say. The 200 is a bit of speed work, it's part of training. So I had that in my head, that 200 was just a bit of training, it wasn't just about winning the event, it will help my 400, and that was my mindset. But the timetable kind of changed, and I remember getting off the track for the final of the 400, and I didn't have a chance to go back through the call room because literally they were being taken over to the start for the 200. So, you know, great officials, I take my hat off to them, because, you know, when they need to help athletes, they are there, and they were fine. They said, okay, Donna, you can go straight out to do the 200. And for me, I was the kind of athlete that I warmed up as I went along through rounds, and having more rounds worked for me. So when it used to be 4 rounds of the 400, that was perfect. That was music to my ears. When it scaled back to 3, it was, oh my gosh, I almost have to run my heat like it's a semi-final. So that's how my body worked, and obviously that was down to my training. But yeah, doubling up was a hard task, but at the same time, it didn't give me a chance to think, oh my gosh, I'll get nervous. My body was already warm. I didn't have to re-warm up, use up energy. And it worked for me. And I absolutely enjoyed that weekend, how tiring it was. But mentally, I felt so good, and the weather was perfect. I was just so pumped up for that event. It's crazy. I don't think I've ever had that feeling.
Wow. I mean, I remember you crossing the line because I was there watching, and I think one thing that you touched on, I think, is key. You did the training to be able to do that. You had the grounding, you did the winter work, and you did the speed endurance, especially. Your preparation leading into those trials would have been spot on. And so that's why you're able to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Short recovery stuff we did a lot of that. You know, even sometimes I would say, right, this is your last rep, and you put everything into it. You cross that line, it's like, right, get back to the line, got another run. So short recovery was the norm for me, and despite how knackered I was, there was always something in the barrel for me to scrape to get through that last repetition. So not only did it test my ability physically, but mentally as well. So it didn't faze me 2005 having to go from one round to another round, and no matter the distance, because my body was used to it.
Absolutely. So as I said before, World Champs, trials, Olympic trials, and then 2009. You tried it at the end of 2009. But one thing I also, why I put the work in, you worked at ETF the entire time, pretty much, didn't you, while you were competing?
Yeah.
And now you went on to work for UK as vice president, and I will attempt to say the whole of this: equality, diversity, inclusion, and domestic athletic operations manager. Say that twice as fast.
I always abbreviate. ED&I is easier.
There you go. But you haven't stopped that kind of, it seems like that work ethic that you put into your training. So we went all the training together on numerous occasions, and I can testify to the amount of work that you put in, but you train smart and hard. And now you seem to transition into your work life very seamlessly, and you've been very successful there as well. So how do you find that transition?
I think you've got it spot on. I was one of the lucky ones where I had an organisation that supported my athletics. So I was able to work part-time at EDF Energy for much of my career. I was with them for 19 years. I worked previously to that as well. But what was really key is they allowed me to put my athletics first and then my job, but I was able to juggle the two somehow. I don't know, sometimes going to work 4 o'clock in the morning, come back, have a nap, and then go training. So I was able to time manage and work it around that worked for me. Then towards the back end of my career, when I retired from athletics and I was able to just focus on my career at EDF Energy, that became a full-time role. And everyone says to me, how did you find the transition from athlete to work? And I said, well, I'm probably one of the very few that found it quite easy, because in a sense, when you're an athlete and you're working, you've got 2 jobs, whereas now I'm retired, it's only 1 job. I don't have to think about getting up and training. So in a sense, it's easier, but I still have my fingers in so many other pies, as you can see by my job role. I can't keep still.
And you do a lot of charity work. I'm always seeing you doing various bits and pieces and raising awareness for so many different causes. Sometimes I wonder how you breathe. Like the other passions of yours. Do you want to tell us anything else about things that you're involved in?
Yeah, so I'm a breast cancer now ambassador, simply because I'm a breast cancer survivor, which is why I retired in 2009. I did come out of retirement in 2012 for obvious reasons, but everyone's thinking, why are you coming out? They called me the grandma of athletics because I kept coming back. But it was more from an inspirational perspective. No one knew about my diagnosis, and I just wanted to leave the sport on my terms as opposed to something else making me retire. So that was the reason why I came out of retirement. Had no hope of getting to London, although I would have loved to, but it was more from an inspirational angle. So I'm heavily involved in that charity. I also sit on the Sport Honours Committee, so anyone out there who's listening who deserves an MBE, OBE, please send in your nominations, because I'm forever getting frustrated that there's not enough athletics nominations, and I know there's great work being done out there, and I sit on the committee, so I'll be fighting for athletics.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm also vice chair for the British Athletes Commission, so that is really key, especially when, life after athletics, and also as an athlete now around mental health, supporting with any grievances with the NGB, etc. So I really feel that whatever I've learned throughout my career, I can give something back in some shape or form. I haven't always got the answers, but I think it's important as a former athlete to give something back.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Just wanted to go through the things that you say, what it takes to win. So I've written down some questions here. For me, I know my team was key. I would not have been able to do any of what I achieved without my team. And I know through speaking to you, it's similar as well. So, coach, the keys to working in a coach athlete care, you touched on it earlier, but in particular, AO, how that unit working, how much of an impact did it have on your career?
When I talk about AO, bless his soul, he's passed away now. He was everything, from my friend to my coach to my dad to my doctor to my nutritionist. It really highlighted how many characteristics a coach needs to have to help their athlete be successful. And they're not just a coach. The hours that coaches put in for their athletes does get unnoticed. And it's only now I'm out of it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, out in the cold, like tonight, you know, it's awful weather out there. They'd be out there regardless just to see their athletes achieve. But for me, the key characteristics of it, you know, you have to have trust. I trusted AO with my life. You know, he'll tell me things, he'll be straight with me. Sometimes I didn't like what he said, but I had to agree with him 99% of the time because he knew me better than I knew myself sometimes, you know, and athletes are often, you know, victims of self-doubt, and that's when the coach and your support network really steps in to you know, eradicate any self-doubt and think positively. So trust is really key. Belief, definitely. He believed in me throughout the career, and you know, I didn't get the Olympic medal, which he believed I should have, and I probably did, but not as much as he did. Probably that's why I didn't get one. And also the respect. I respected what he did as a coach. He understood that he didn't have the answers to everything, but yet would go out and investigate himself and bring that back to the team and experiment, trial and error it was, especially in the early days, and just go wider and just find out more about the event. 400 is, you know, it's such a tough event. And then, you know, he started to explore more into the endurance side as well. So I was training with sprinters and 800 meter runners, which, you know, is a blessing for me because I was getting the best of both worlds. But yeah, I think those are the three key things. I could go on all night about him all day long. And what he was very good at is balancing, you know, the serious stuff, but also you've got to enjoy what you're doing. And for me, it was, yes, it was. We really did work hard, but there was always that fun element to it as well.
Yeah, I was saying to you yesterday, I remember him all the training, doing all kinds of things. You try it first. So you had an appreciation of what he was asking you guys to do. And obviously not all coaches are able to do that and be in a position to do that. However, that was his way. And I think it was impressive to see. I remember him doing single hand snatch
Yeah.
on the side of the track. Let me have a go. Let's see if we can do it.
Yeah, definitely, because of course I was training with Danny Crates, who's a Paralympian and, you know, gold medalist in Athens, and he would go and try out everything with one hand behind his back just to see the feeling Danny would get and then give him that session. So, you know, he was special in that way, and that made us feel worse because if he could do it, we were like, we have no excuses why we can't.
The other points were having a good connection with your physiotherapist / master cardio. A lot of people may not know you broke your ankle in 1998.
98, absolutely. Me and it was AO's bright ideas to move up to 400 hurdles. First session, went over the hurdle, fell, broke my ankle. Oh, horrendous. Like, that was the end of my career. I do think that's where I would have achieved a lot of things in the 4 hurdles, but it wasn't meant to be. And the relationship with not only with me, with my physio, but the relationship my coach had with my physio as well. And I would always go to my physio and ask him, you know, can I give Donna this and can I give Donna that? But when I broke my ankle, the first person AO rang was my physio and said, what should I do? What should I do? And my physio said to him, whatever you do, do not let them put a full cast on her leg, because we need to be able to treat it. So make sure it's an open cast. And that's exactly what happened. So I was able to get the treatment. So I was able to get back running quicker than normal. I don't know whether that happens now, but back then it was just mind blowing to me. I'm thinking, you're going to get me back running. I did it in the winter. You're going to get me back running by January. And yes, I was.
Yeah, I remember it distinctly because it was very much the talk of the physio world. Like, she doesn't have a cast on her foot, my foot's broken. However, he was skilled enough and had enough experience to work me through that. We were able to compete in 99, and then 2000 happened.
Yeah.
If you had been in a cast, recovery would have been so much longer. And obviously he was in a position good enough to do that. And at the bottom of that, I know, because I've been around you a long time, your support network, your family,
Yeah.
You're, I mean, I know your sister.
Everyone knows my sister.
For me, it's key, and I know it's important to you. So, in terms of people watching and how important is it to have that environmental support or
Yeah.
whatever you need to do?
My family, they love athletics anyway, and would watch it, especially if I'm running. But what was nice for me, it was just a nice breather away. You know, if things were going bad in my athletics career, if I'd had a bad race, bad training session, to go home and just be normal and not talk about athletics was just a breath of fresh air, and just bring me back down to earth. You know, okay, Donna, you've had a bad day, let's move on, let's have a great dinner, let's watch a movie, and just be normal, which some athletes can just be so focused on the bad performance and just be on it all the time. You don't have any let up, and that causes more pressure on them, and it's not healthy. So for me, having family there, you know, they weren't able to travel with me all the time, but just knowing that I had that comfort blanket, as it were, when things weren't going great, and just bring me back down to earth is just so important.
Absolutely. So, for me, things that really stand out from that long list of championship performances from junior girls right up to seniors. For me, there were three things that really stand out, and I think it's key for us to speak about, is that you compete in more than one event. 4, 2, the 100, 4x1 and the 4x4. The 5 events, and you were trying the hurdle. And you invariably did more than one event per competition. What's your take on that? What was the philosophy behind doing that kind of work?
You know, I say this all the time. I wish more athletes would do it. You know, for me, if you had when I was a lot younger, because I was doing this for years, even before international level. So you'd have the 100 meters, 3 rounds of the 100 meters on the Saturday. This was in the county championships, and then 3 rounds of the 200 the next day. And my coach back then, remember, she made me do an 800 as well in the county. So that was just like, this is crazy. This is actually crazy. But it was 3 rounds in each. At the 800, I think I only had 2, so I was able to manage it. But that was the mindset. I was used to doing it. And for me, I always saw it as a second chance to do well. My 100 wasn't my main event. I wasn't great, as I said. You know, coming out of the blocks was not my forte. So I always knew, right, great, I've got another chance doing the 200 the next day, which was more my event. But it gave me that confidence to get back out there. If I didn't do so well in the 100, get back out there and make the most of it. And then the relays as well. Again, it's not just as in an individual event. You know, you're part of a team. You feel part of something. And I come from an era where team is so important. Although our sport is very individual, I think that team effort can just thrive. It breeds success. And Commonwealth Games in '98, I only really went for the 400 and the 4x4, and somehow he drafted me and said, yeah, Donna will do the 4x1. I knew how to change a baton, and that was it from my younger days. You know, the coaches I worked with back then said, Donna, you don't know what's going to happen. You could be put on first, second, third, fourth. You should be able to pass a baton regardless. And again, that's the work ethic that I grew up with. So I was able to be drafted in. Not that I was the quickest, but I could change a baton. But for me, as I said, you know, I think doubling up can be seen as, now, you know, you're overdoing it, but for me it was all part and parcel of training, and the bigger goal was to succeed at my main event. So it was all connected. It's stepping stones for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for me, speed begets speed. If you do 100 and a 200 as 400 meter runner, you'd be a faster 400 meter runner. Couple that with your strength and your endurance. Hello.
Yeah.
It's a match made in heaven. So yeah, I completely agree with everything you've been saying. And also training smart as well as hard. I've got no shortcuts and there are no magic sessions.
No.
There's not one session that's going to catapult you to stardom. journey. So yeah, we have a lot of people think they can do specific things and that's going to work. I just need to do this, or I need to do 200-300s in a whole winter season.
Yeah, and just following up from that is quite interesting. When I was a lot younger, I absolutely hated doing long stuff and cross country and all of that. When I got older, it really dawned on me the things I didn't like doing are the things I needed to work on. And clearly it was the endurance that I needed to work on. I could do speed all day when I was younger. When I got older, it was the speed, endurance stuff. It was the weight training, which I hated doing. I hated lifting weights, but those are the things I needed to work on, as well as the things I was good at. So it's getting that balance, which means you have to put a lot more work in and time. Sometimes in the winter we'd be training twice a day. So it's fitting it in, obviously, to manage your body and what your body can cope with. But then you have that plan, and that's what the coach does.
Absolutely. And for coaches who say, I can't get my athletes to double up, what do you say to that?
I can't get my athletes to double up. Well, you know what? I always think that the coach is the leader, and if they're not respecting what you're saying and they're not taking that on board, then perhaps they're not in the right group. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's what my AO, that's the approach he took. He worked out the athletes that were coming to his group who had the right work ethic. And if the athlete feels that they know more than you, then why are they wanting you to coach them in the first instance? It doesn't make sense. I'm not great at mathematics, but that does not add up to me. So, well, then fine, you can go ahead and do what you want to do, but this is what I'm telling you to do, and this is what we need to work on in order for you to get better.
Absolutely. So I have some videos. So I found 3 videos. This one is the World Championships in Helsinki, and I will allow you to commentate over the
top. Oh gosh!
The second leg, the 4x4.
Yeah, I think it was second leg. I was depressed going into the 4x4, I must admit, but because I did appallingly in the individual. But again, this is my second chance.
So let's see.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I did love running second leg, I must admit. Oh, I heard my name. That's great. I honestly can't even remember how I felt, but running second leg when you can brake feels so good. You almost feel like you're flying. But I was quite good at tracking. I was never good running from the front in the relay, to be honest. But again, when you're in the relay, you're doing it for the team. It's not just about you.
Però c'è ancora la Giamaica e anche la Gran Bretagna, sono tutte e 2 le nazioni lì.
I wish I could speak this language. Yeah, I look like I'm dying a bit there though, don't I? Oh my gosh, someone's catching me!
Russia e Giamaica, gara 2 per la medaglia d'oro, partite.
Oh well, at least I still handed it over in third.
Exactly, and you guys won bronze.
Oh dear.
Absolutely. So this is the 4x4 in Turin.
It's the lead-off runner for them.
Lead-off run.
And finally,
indoors, I thought it would be nice to
show a comparison. In the final. Well done to Donna Fraser. Has she recovered though?
Yeah, lane 6. I had to have lane 6 because these long legs do not cope with indoors very well. And in fact, that was the first year that I did 400 indoors ever. So it was definitely a bit of a challenge for me, but again, it was the team.
And Vicky Barr, the other 2 British athletes. So Donna Fraser leading off for Great Britain. They're out in lane 6, but the Russians in lane 1 have got such a powerful quartet. They, of course, are the world record holders.
Gosh, I'm getting nervous just watching this.
Well, I don't suppose the lead-off runner for Russia, Natalia Antyuk, will enjoy this lane draw. She's in lane 1 with Elena Kievich of Belarus outside her, and the Belarusian is actually going away. Donna Fraser going comfortably around that top bend, but remember, as they come off this bend now, they'll break for the inside, and Donna Fraser just cruises towards the inside lane. This is a very good first leg by Donna, Steve.
Oh gosh, hope I don't die.
Well, tactics all important. The British selection, of course, they've got Marilyn and Coro. They did well last time, and they didn't even include Marilyn and Jenny, of course, 2 years ago, weren't put in the team. This time they've taken the risk with Marilyn. Has she recovered? Because I think we're going to be in with a medal opportunity here. Donna's done well here. Now the attack comes from Belarus and Russia, but it's a good lead-off leg. We're right in amongst it.
Well, Kim Wall will be ready and waiting there right on the inside.
Oh my gosh.
And goes
I can't believe how nervous I'm getting just watching this.
Well, I would like to point out, this is 2009. This is the year you retired, and you're still competing for Great Britain, leading off in the 4x4 indoors, and handing over in first place. To me, you have to appreciate what's going on here. This is the 400 meters final at the Olympics. This is the only video I could get that we're allowed to use, so it's not the whole thing. So here we go.
Oh dear.
What you did from 120 through was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Donna, you still there? Everybody still there? It looks like her thing has frozen. Let me see. So, if you bear with us 1 second, let's see if we can get Donna back up. She's got a nice smiling picture. So, are we there? You might have to refresh. Donna, if you can, I can see you're logging back in. There you go. Yay!
I'm back.
We got two of you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Oh, hold on.
Sound is gone.
Because you're the third person. Yes. Okay. Can you hear us now? Can you hear me now?
Let me take this off.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
I can't hear you, but I can see your lips moving. I'm seeing the questions though.
Okay, maybe we jump to the questions and then we can answer those. So let's do this.
You have, Donna, and when did you make the changes? Oh my gosh, okay. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Don't know why the sound's gone. Okay, so how many coaches did I have? I had, oh my gosh, I have to name them now. So Sheila, Jim, Clarence and Donovan, Les, then Aya. So 6 in total. That was easy. That was an easy question. And linked to my experience, how did you transition between coach? What tips would you give? That's a really good question. From my first coach to my second coach, I just felt at that point that I needed to move on, and I guess every athlete should be really in tune with themselves and know that they're either not pushing themselves and be honest with them as individuals. And I took made that decision to move from my first coach. So I was pretty young. I was probably 15. 16 to make that decision, and this was before mobile phones and internet, so I had to literally pick up the phone and dial it and tell her over the phone, and she wasn't best pleased. But again, I think the beauty of a quality coach is knowing when to let go, and that's really key. And pretty much it's taken, it was the same take each coach I moved on to, is I felt the coach took me as far as they possibly could. And after that first coach incident, all of the others were happy for me to move on. There were no issues. I still talk to them all now. Interestingly, even my very first coach, I think she probably realizes that I made the right decision. So in terms of tips to move on, I think it really is down to the individual as an athlete to know, is it right to move on, and whether that coach has taken you as far as they possibly can. And also for the coach to identify it, they may feel, I've taken this athlete as far as I can go, it's time for me to pass them on. I don't know. What do you do to calm? What do I do that's a really funny one. Well, I'm well known for giving out wine gums in the call room. What I found and what I quickly identified is in the call room, when you're in that close proximity with the people that you're going to be racing against, it can be very, very intense, and I would get quite nervous. But what I found was when I was just as intense as everybody else, just eyeballing each other out, that transpired into my racing. I was tense and shoulders and everything. So what I would do is just be myself. I'm quite jovial, smiling, relaxed kind of person, and the wine gums would definitely keep me calm. So I'd be offering them out to the people I was going to be racing with, and also talking to the officials. That actually calmed me down as well. And another technique was breathing, slowing down that heart rate and not using up too much energy. I wasn't one for listening to music while warming up. That wasn't for me. I just needed to get in the zone and just think about my race pattern. Oh my gosh, so diet. So in terms of diet, you know, when I first started, nutrition wasn't a big thing. It wasn't until probably halfway through my career that nutritionists came on board, especially with lottery funding and so forth. And what I found was I had several nutritionists throughout my career, but I couldn't find one that really worked for me. So what I did was take bits of each which worked for me. One nutritionist was telling me to eat those midget gems for energy, and I absolutely hated midget gems. It was the worst thing ever. So again, I just think it's key for athletes to know what is right to eat, but also you've got to enjoy eating. You've got to enjoy what you're eating, and it shouldn't be a chore. So we never calorie counted, but what I did know is what my race weight was leading into competition. So when I was at my best, my race weight was between 64 and 66 kilos. Although having said that, I did have a quite a good race at 68 kilos, which is bizarre. So I knew what my race weight was, but food was just being sensible. You mentioned you'd like to see more athletes doing wonderful. Yeah, I love this notion, but who do you believe needs the most convincing of this, athletes or coaches? I think coaches. I know the governing body isn't a fan of this, but the best example I can give is Donna Asher-Smith. She doubles up. She does 100 and 200. She mixes it up a little bit. And I know her coach, John Blackie, is quite old school. And when I say old school, I mean the work ethic that I had with other coaches. So I do think you have to mix a little bit the old thinking with the new thinking moving forward now. And some of the best athletes in the world double up. I know Usain Bolt wasn't a fan of 400, but I know his coach would make him do some 400 meter training sessions to help his 200 meters. Oh gosh, so yeah, English schools. My mindset, my mindset as a youngster, it wasn't as professional as it was towards the back end of my career. English schools, well, back then, I saw athletics as a hobby, and I just enjoyed doing it. I just happened to be quite good at it. And it wasn't until I won my first English schools that I became the talk of the town, and everyone was talking about Donna Fraser, and I didn't understand or comprehend what that meant winning the English schools. And, you know, going into each English schools as the favourite didn't faze me, and I don't remember ever having self-doubt at English schools. I thrived on it, and as I said, you know, the rounds, going through the whole call room, etc., was just a buzz for me. And probably as well, you could see the other athletes being quite scared, which is really awful, which I didn't like either. Everyone asking what's your PB in the pens, as they called it then, and that was quite refreshing for me. It actually helped me be quite calm. But the learnings and the skills that I learned from the English schools, I think definitely helped towards my future athletics career. Oh my gosh, it had a huge impact. And you know, I was going through, as I said earlier, through some of my training diaries, and what my coach really encouraged us to do is not only just write down what the session was, but also how we felt going into the session and how we felt afterwards. And some of them are quite hilarious, how I felt and the terminology that I used, because again, it was me knowing what my coach expected of me and disappointing him in a way. And that goes way back to the first conversations we had at the very beginning of the winter training, but that just became the norm. But yeah, it was a huge impact, you know, knowing what he expected of me and then transpiring that thought process into each session was just so important. I mean, I didn't see it then, but now just reading them, it just makes me smile and think, okay, so I know what kind of headspace I was in. What's your best memory from your career? Oh, wow. I have quite a few. My first Olympics in '96, that was definitely not only an eye-opener for me, but I felt that I'd achieved my goal. I set my goal to get to the Olympic Games back in 1984, watching the Los Angeles Olympic Games. And when I got to Atlanta, I was like, I've made it. But what was really inspiring was being around other sporting greats, not just in athletics, but other sports as well, and having the opportunity to see what they did, you know, to succeed, how they trained, what they ate, when they went to bed. It was almost like a visual course for me, that my first Olympics, and then the whole excitement around an Olympic Games was just phenomenal. So I think my first Olympic Games was definitely a huge memory. English schools is always close to my heart because that's grassroots and that's what set me off. But then what the golden thread throughout my entire career is that friendship. And for those of you that will know what the Olympic and Paralympic values are, those values mean so much to me and transpire into my everyday life. So friendship is a big thing, and making different friends from around the world. So, and I'm glad that I can still say I've got a lot of those friends now.
Can you hear me? What's the question?
Questions. How did you prepare for racing over the round? So, oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, yay!
Yay! Brilliant. Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, for me, what is really key, winter training is, you know, the absolute pinnacle. My coach always used to say, what you put in the winter is what you'll reap in the summer. And although I did an indoor season, we never actually broke our training to do the indoors. You know, I wasn't an indoor specialist, so I treated indoors as training. So I was still doing all the long runs, hardly touched the track during the winter. We were always on the grass to save our legs, save my Achilles, which I had that ongoing problem with, and just doing a lot of hard slog work, you know, the hills, the repetitions in the cold. And for me, that really did prepare me for the summer season and the rounds. And as I said before, in terms of being able to cope with the rounds, and as I said before, 400 meters, when I first started out at international level, it was 4 rounds, which is now 3. And though, you know, World Championships in 97, we had a heat in the morning, the second round in the evening, the semi-final the next day, and then you'd have a day rest, and then the final would have been the next day. So my training was very much geared towards that, putting you're 110% into each round. I couldn't just jog round in my heat because I was up against the best in the world, and it was the best in the world. You know, they weren't running anything slower than 49s back then. So I had to run my heat like it was a final. So my training was very much geared towards that, not having to save myself, just giving it and being able to manage, knowing that I can come back and do the same thing in the next round. Oh, I've answered that about winter training.
We've got a couple of questions.
What were the sessions in training you enjoyed the most and hated the most? Oh my gosh, I love this question. The sessions I loved the most, I loved doing 150s in training. I don't know why, 150s, just coming off that turn just always used to feel really good. Although I would say I didn't like the session 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, when I'd finished that session, provided I'd done it well, I absolutely enjoyed it. It really pushed my limits mentally and physically. And also another session that we did, actually I wrote it down because I've completely forgot that we used to do this session. It was 3 sets of 2 100s off a minute recovery. And again, that short recovery, but it's all about pace judgment. So a lot of our sessions were around pace judgment. And having said that, sometimes I didn't stick to the plan when it came to racing, hence why I'd always go bombing off in the first 200 and then die the last bit. But again, that's what you need to have for 400. So I wouldn't say I hated sessions, because I learned to embrace them, because you go in with a mindset saying, oh, I hate this session, it will be a bad session. So I try to embrace the ones that I wasn't really looking forward to. So just changing the words. Oh my gosh, yeah. Training with Freeman was an opportunity that I'm grateful to this very day to have. She's quite a closed person. She just gets on with her work. So having that opportunity to train with her was amazing. And what thing I did learn from that was, you know, we put other athletes who are better than us on a pedestal, but in fact, she's just like me. We did exactly the same training sessions. Of course, she was ahead of me, but towards going into Sydney, that gap started to close, and I started to realise that it wasn't so much, it was my ability, but I was getting stronger without even realising it. But it's so much around your mindset, and that is definitely something that I learned. She's human just like me. It's who wants it the most at the end of the day, and she wanted it in Sydney for obvious reasons. And in fact, what I should have learned is I should have just followed her in that final, but I didn't. I was so adamant to run my own race, but hey ho, you live and learn.
Well, Donna, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating last 55 minutes.
Time's flown.
I know, and I know that there's some more questions coming in, and I'm sorry we have to jump off because another one's starting after another webinar starting after us. But really appreciate all your
pleasure
sharing. I think this is the way forward. We should share our knowledge as coaches and athletes, and with the career and caliber of an athlete that you are, because I know you still see him running around. So can't
hide, can I?
Absolute pleasure. So thank you so much. Really.
Thank you. And if you want to send the questions, I'm happy to answer them offline.
Okay, perfect. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Donna.
All right then. You too. Take care.